we're going to go to Samantha Walker, who is going to be talking about democratizing machine learning. How you doing, Samantha?
I'm good. How are you, Sean?
I love artificial intelligence, machine learning and deep learning, discussions of that. So I'm absolutely interested in what you have to say today. So you can talk about your background and go right into your presentation.
Wonderful. All right, I have the presentation up. Here we go. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for introducing me, and thank you so much to Data Workout as well for organizing this forum and for inviting me to speak to all of you about democratizing machine learning. Before I dive into this topic, I'll give a bit more background on myself and why it is that I'm here ultimately speaking to you today. My background is actually originally in structural engineering. I started my career off in that space, worked as a structural engineer in Canada, in the US, and in Europe. And a few years ago, I became very interested in how technology could be incorporated into that industry. And that ultimately led me to launch the machine learning division of the architecture firm I was working at the time. And one of the biggest challenges that we came across in applying machine learning to a traditional industry was being able to easily deploy the models that we created into tools that other people could use. And that's what ultimately inspired me to start Mia, which is a no-code tool that allows users to easily transform their machine learning models into interactive apps that anyone can use. And in doing so, we're trying to bridge the gap between data scientists and non-technical decision makers or end users, stakeholders, so that we can ultimately make machine learning more accessible to everyone. And so this topic of democratizing machine learning is one that is very near and dear to my heart. So what we're going to cover today is three different aspects related to democratizing machine learning. First, what does it mean? Second, why does it matter? And lastly, how can we ultimately achieve it? So we'll start off with a definition. And I know it might seem a bit obvious, but there has been a lot of talk in recent years about democratizing AI, democratizing machine learning, and it's kind of become a buzzword. So before diving into the subject, I just wanted to get on the same page about what it is that we actually mean by democratizing it. So democratizing machine learning is the spread of machine learning development to a wider user base that includes those without specialized knowledge of machine learning itself, essentially making it accessible to everyone. Now, why does that matter? First and foremost, it matters in order to even the playing field between companies and individuals as well. According to a 2018 McKinsey report, AI has the potential to deliver additional global economic activity of around $13 trillion by 2030. That's the size of China's GDP in 2018. So it does have a huge potential impact to our global economy. However, AI adopters could double their cash flow by 2030, while non-adopters could actually experience a 20% decline. So without making machine learning more accessible to everyone, we're essentially, over the coming years, going to see a gap between those companies that are fully adopting it and those that aren't or cannot. And so it's really important that we at least give everyone the opportunity to adopt AI in their business and their life if they choose to, so that as many people, as many businesses as possible can benefit from this potential for growth. Secondly, it matters in order to accelerate further advancements in the field itself. The saying, rising tide lifts all boats, is very applicable to this space. the more people and businesses and industries that are working on machine learning related problems and solutions, the more the field as a whole is going to advance, and we can all benefit from those advancements. So one concrete example of this is the benchmark Imagenet competition that involves training a model on an extensive visual data set. And this competition started about a decade ago, and it's an annual competition. So when it first started, the great majority of the models that were trained on this data set achieved below 75% accuracy. And there was a big gap between those models that achieved near 75% accuracy and the rest of the models in the competition. And over time, that's since gone up to over 98% accuracy, with this competition happening every single year and more companies, people contributing to it over time. And you can see now also from this graph that there's more and more models that are up near that top accuracy amount as well. So imagine how much further we could advance it with more and more people and people from different backgrounds and different industries working on problems in this space. And last but definitely not least, why it matters is to promote proper usage of machine learning. There's a famous mantra in computer science, garbage in, garbage out, and it's very applicable to machine learning specifically. Machine learning models are built on data sets. And depending on the quality and extensiveness of that data set and its applicability to the problem that you're actually looking to solve, you can end up with a model that will spit out garbage. A machine learning model is always going to give a result. So you're always going to get an answer from that model, but if the data set that you're using to build it and the algorithms you're using are not appropriate, then you could end up with results that could actually be damaging to your business and also dangerous and risky for individuals when you talk about high-risk applications of machine learning, such as for loan applications. So democratizing machine learning, or making it more accessible for everyone, goes hand in hand with making it more usable and more understandable so that we can promote the proper usage of machine learning and avoid these dangerous, risky applications. So we've covered the definition of democratizing machine learning and also talked about why it matters, why it's important to achieve. So hopefully up until this point, I've gotten buy-in from all of you listening on those 2 points. And now the last thing we're going to talk about is how we can actually achieve that. So first and foremost, through access to information. And that's there's 2 sides to this coin. On the one side, the groups, the individuals, the companies that are working on machine learning related problems and solutions, they have certain obligations to, when possible, publish their work and make it accessible to people to learn from. And then on the flip side, those looking to apply machine learning to their business have a responsibility to stay informed on the subject, at least at a high level. And that can be from papers that are published, articles online from reputable sources, through videos like those created by Data Workout. And this field is fast evolving, and so it is important to also stay up to date with the latest advancements. Secondly, we can achieve it through access to data. And there's been great advancements in that side of things in recent years as well, in terms of more availability of public data sets. Kaggle is an online data science community that provides public data sets and also organizes competitions. And that's probably the most popular one, but there's more and more public data sets becoming readily available. Google has a online public data set search option, and various organizations and also cities, governments are making, where possible, public data available. And so the more we make these data sets that we can publicly available, the more data points companies will have to work with. And also on not just public data, but also internal data sets and managing those internal data sets. The data set preparation aspect in machine learning is probably the biggest lift. And so making it easier for companies to start to curate their own internal data sets and also manage them is going to go a long way to making applying machine learning more possible for them. Third, through access to resources. And this is one of the reasons why there has been this AI machine learning boom in recent years, is that there have been big advancements in cloud computing and cloud resources. And so we need to continue developing that to continue to provide access to resources for storage, for larger and larger data sets, training for models, and the more complex, the heavier the model, the more compute power is required to train them, and inference as well when it comes to actually sending data and getting predictions back from the models. And last but not least, how can we achieve it? Through access to tools. And this is an area that is, of course, as the founder of MIA, and also very near and dear to my heart. So that's through tools that can facilitate the entire machine learning lifecycle, from data preparation to model training to model deployment, and also management and monitoring of that model once it's been deployed. There's low-code tools, no-code tools like MIA that are more accessible to non-technical people. And when it comes to model training, you may have heard the term AutoML. So that's the ability to be able to automatically train a model by connecting your data set. And so it is an exciting time to be in this space, because there are more and more tools like this coming out all the time. And it's essentially a way to bridge the gap between digital native companies and more traditional enterprise companies that want to be able to apply and benefit from machine learning as well. Now, across these steps, we need to have transparency, ethics, and alignment. So transparency in terms of how the model is built itself, the data set that's used to build it, the algorithms that are used to build it. Transparency on the performance of that model, building models that are explainable, so not moving away from black box and being able to actually explain why we got certain predictions from certain models, and reproducibility. So in terms of documenting how you build the data set, the model, so that somebody else would be able to reproduce it. And that ties back into the point of further advancements in the field. If your work is reproducible, then it can be taken and further developed by someone else and improved upon. Through ethics, so eliminating bias, and this is a big issue and big topic with machine learning, because these models are created based on existing data sets. If there's that data is inherently biased, and so will be the model. And so combating that is key, building models that are fair, that are responsible, and that are trustworthy. And last but not least, it's critical to have organizational alignment when we're developing these models for real-world applications. We can't just develop them in silos. To build really quality models that are going to deliver results that can decrease cost, increase revenue, we need to take a holistic approach and have alignment between data science teams, decision makers, business functions, and end users. And that's this is really an important area for me, and that we're focused on bridging this gap between the data science teams and the other non-technical stakeholders in the company, so that we can kind of build something better than we would have if we're just doing it in our own silos. Now, in order to achieve all of this, we need a strategy and a framework to encompass and direct all of it. And this can take the form of governance and regulations. There have been advancements in recent years when it comes to guidelines for building fair and responsible AI. Also, the EU recently is making a push for regulations and AI regulations, especially when it comes to high risk AI. And so there's definitely resources we can pull from in that sense, but there still is a lot of catching up to do when it comes to external governance and regulations in this field. And that's only going to, this field is only going to continue to advance. And if you're looking to apply AI right now today to your business, it's imperative that you set up your own internal governance regulatory structure to define the framework for all of this, so that we can ensure that we're promoting the proper usage of machine learning and developing models that are quality and are ethical and unbiased. So to conclude, I wanted to revisit the initial definition that we started with in light of everything I shared. Democratization of machine learning is crucial, in my opinion, so that everyone can benefit from it. But with democratization, with making it more accessible to everyone, also comes responsibility. And to truly democratize machine learning, we need to not just make it accessible to everyone, but also we need to make it easily usable and understandable by everyone. So we're not just applying machine learning for machine learning's sake, but we're building quality models that A, will benefit our businesses and our lives, and B, will not present a danger or a risk to anyone. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or chat more with you, Sean.
Yep. Hey, how are you? Okay. First of all, I love that. I just want to say you are awesome. I love that. I absolutely love what you're talking about there. Before I really get into, I guess, my questions here, one thing is, I'm sure you're on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, and I know one of the things that you see it less on LinkedIn, but you see a lot on Twitter. There's a lot on Twitter that you see that you don't see elsewhere. But as it relates to AI, what you see is a lot of hashtagging about AI, machine learning, deep learning, right? Or somebody may put something, machine learning on something that's not machine learning, and then deep learning on something that's just purely AI. So before we get into, I guess, the questions that I have for you, give the audience, you're the Samantha, well, not the Samantha definition, but in your voice, what AI is apart from machine learning, and then machine learning apart, if you want to go into deep learning. So go ahead.
Yeah, that is a very, very good question, and it's become the concepts have become a bit muddied because we tend to use them very interchangeably, but they are different. So you said them in the right order. AI is the kind of all-encompassing concept, and it really relates to essentially building human intelligence into machines or into computers. And so it is a very broad definition. Yes. Machine learning is a subset of AI, and that's specific to training models to make predictions or to learn from data. And so it's a form of human intelligence into transforming that into, or translating that into machines. But machine learning is typically when we talk about machine learning, we're talking about training models on simple algorithms. And the big difference between machine learning and any kind of other AI is that we're not predefining what we want it to do. It's learning on its own, in a sense.
Right.
Then the next concept is deep learning that you mentioned, and that in itself is a subset of machine learning.
Right.
And it's very similar, except that with deep learning, the algorithms that we're training the models on are actually neural networks, and that they're modeled after the human brain. Right. So they're more powerful, let's say, than simple machine learning algorithms in general. That being said, there's really different. It depends on what you're actually trying to achieve. Right. There's cases where you can build better models using machine learning than you can with deep learning, and vice versa. So it really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve.
All right. Thank you for explaining that to the audience, because every day, you're on those hashtags, you see people are just piling it on, and then they'll put, 5G on something that's just merely, IoT, or, put IoT on something that's just AI. So it's just really interesting. What are some of the, not to say intractable obstacles, if you will, but just what are some of the obstacles that you see that are getting in the way of a wider machine learning adoption, say in traditional business?
So I think, in my experience, and this is ultimately why I ended up starting MIA, one of our biggest barriers in applying it to this traditional space of architecture, engineering, construction was on the deployment side, or the putting the models into production. And for us, the reason for that is, on the data preparation side, there's tools that exist already today to allow people to annotate data. A lot of it can be done manually to begin with. So even if it's a lot of work, you could just sit down and crunch through it and prepare the data. So there's where there's a will, there's a way for the data side of things. And then when it comes to model training, there are AutoML tools out there that will automate the training of the model itself based on your own data. There's also there's many different machine learning frameworks that exist out there that make it, even though a lot of them are still like code-based or low code-based, it makes it easier to apply machine learning to your own data. But when it came to actually putting those models into production, meaning putting them into a tool so that they can actually be applied by other people outside of code, that requires a very complex skill set of machine learning operations, back-end development, front-end software development. It's getting out of the realm of data science almost and into the realm of DevOps. And that was a big barrier, because there wasn't that many tools out there to support that, and to support it especially for non-tech first or non-digital native companies. And so I think me is one example, but there are more and more tools that are coming that are being developed now and in the past few years, and I'm sure moving forward as well, to help facilitate that side of the equation. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that recent years have been focused on the research and development of models, and now there's this market shift from developing them to actually being able to consume them and really utilize them to derive value.
Right. What is your vision of, say, private industry and government working together, right, to ensure, say, particularly on issues like a bias in AI, making sure that it's more representative, all those kinds of things. Well, because I know that there are these conversations, and there's always a hearing here, and certainly Europe is much more ahead of the United States in terms of preparing legislation and so forth on this topic. But what is your vision? Should government play in your mind, say, a greater role? Should private industry play that greater role? Or you just believe that it should be that 50-50 split down the middle, with both sides really putting in, exerting, the necessary energy to move this and will this forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and unfortunately, there's not necessarily a great answer to it. I think in the ideal scenario, I would love to see private companies working hand in hand with government to develop kind of governance and regulation frameworks that are going to ensure that companies and individuals are developing these models in a fair and unbiased and ethical way.
Right.
That's my ideal vision of
right.
but I know the reality is a lot more complicated than that.
Yes.
So I do think that there is this it's almost like a tug of war, right? There is this dichotomy between industry and between government, and I do think both sides need to push each other so that we can continue to advance this field and advance it in the right way. And I think on the industry side, the more that we make advances with machine learning, the more it's going to push government to put forward these guidelines and these regulations. So I think both sides need to be involved for that. But I think in the interim, while government is catching up, I do think it's the responsibility of companies that are developing these machine learning tools and also applying machine learning to build out their own internal frameworks for governance to make sure that what they're building is quality and not putting people or companies at risk.
Got it. How do you think, well, first of all, I'm sure you're familiar with code.org and some of these other entities who are pushing and really evangelizing around the topic of making the AI and machine learning spaces more inclusive, more diverse. So what are your thoughts on, not your thoughts on, but I'm sure you have thoughts on this, but what do you believe needs to be done, certainly to bring women, people of color, and other, communities, marginalized communities, into that AI machine learning space, particularly in traditional businesses and that kind of thing. But it's not, if it doesn't work in traditional businesses and someone wants to really kind of move into this and maybe start their own, what are some of the approaches, strategies, pathways that you believe we can bring this about?
I think that it is on the responsibility of the people looking to apply machine learning to their industry to be informed on the subject, right. and build that into the pipelines and the framework and the models that they are building.
Right.
It really starts with the data. Honestly, that's the biggest. It will feed its way through the entire machine learning lifecycle and pipeline, but it really starts with the data. And the danger is if we just, if we build models blindly using data sets that aren't vetted for bias,
right.
that will just perpetuate through the model. And I think staying informed and the issue is that it takes more time to curate a data set and look out for those things, but making sure that that's part of your pipeline, part of your strategy for the data sets that you're curating
right.
is critical. I've seen all too often that people will just take a data set and apply it and want to get the model with the best accuracy, but the accuracy really doesn't mean anything if the data set to begin with is flawed, and so that needs to be the focus.
Let me ask you, I guess this could be like a fun question. I saw this thing on Sunday, and they're talking about AI being used, well, particularly machine learning, being used in machine learning tools that are being used to create art, right? Paintings and everything. I'm not sure if you saw that. It was on CBS. You can check that out. It's just awesome. But towards the end of it, they were talking about how a group, I think in New York, used this guy. He created these machine learning tools, and they created this art that sold for, it was amazing amount of money. and the guy believes that he should he should get a cut of that because they use his tools. So this kind of gets into the issue of like AI law, how that's going to, that's going to evolve. So what are your thoughts? And it is no right or wrong answer, but have you heard that story? And you think we'll be hearing more about, these kinds of things as we move forward? I mean, people creating these tools and then others creating works of art that are selling and multi-million-dollar ventures. And then folks will say, hey, I was never cited. I was never compensated, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting side effect of applying machine learning and building these tools.
Yes.
Specifically to the point of the people building the tools getting a cut. I think it might become more complicated when we get more towards general AI, general artificial intelligence, which is where computers are at human intelligence level on their own, and then it becomes more tricky. I think at this point in time, machine learning is it's not an entity. It's a tool that we can use. It's a means to an end. It's something that we can incorporate into our work to enhance it, to improve it. So to that end, the tools that exist to facilitate applying it, I don't see that as any different than tools that facilitate people to build other things, like a website builder or a form builder, or any other kind of physical tools. Even those companies don't, to my knowledge, get a cut of what the revenue that people get from using those tools. So in my opinion, I don't see it differently. I think that the lines will become more blurred the more we get closer to general AI. But to your point about the whole field of AI law, that there are some really, I think that's going to continue to advance as well. The more we push this field, and the more use cases like that come up for it, and I think a lot will have to do around IP rights as well, because the models are based off of data. Where did that data come from? Who really owns that data? And if you're using that data to build the model, you built the model, but the data comes from someone else. Who owns the rights to that model and how it's used? I think that will, to me, that's the first kind of first thing we have to pick off and when it comes to AI law, is how we approach that.
Okay, yeah, I shared that on my LinkedIn wall, but I can send you that link. It was not really about that, but it was just talking about how artificial intelligence is just, because I've seen more of this stuff. I know that the Economist shared something, and I think the New York Times did something recently. So I'm aware of how it's being used in that field, but to then see this guy at a conference say that his tools, and that, he was not cited. So that's interesting. So, and so I guess sort of a last topic here. Let's talk about maybe AI for good. And you're familiar with the AI for Good conference every year. It's in Switzerland. And so the United Nations does that. And I think one of the justifications for it's almost people who accentuate the positive, right? They're like, hey, we just want to be positive and all will be well in the world. But I understand individuals trying to do this, because for the longest time, we've had this science fiction view, right, of AI, that machines are coming. I had a client here in Seattle, and she told me, she said, I don't deal with that Terminator stuff. I mean, it was funny. But then I had to bring her down and let her know how certain AI tools can help her with the productivity. She had a cleaners, and she had like a grocery store, and she's using those tools now. So she's less on the science fiction aspect of it. But talk a little bit about, I don't know what your view is on it, but it's just more like people who believe that if we can talk a little bit more about the positive and increasingly the productivity side of AI, that can make it more digestible when we start talking about the more potentially darker aspects of it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. Obviously, I come with my own biases because I'm the creator of a machine learning tool. So
Mhm.
obviously, I'm definitely in the camp of I believe that it can be and can be used for good,
Right.
and I really see it as a resource, as a tool that people can use and can apply to their business the same way it was for computers for personal computers when they first came out. So I see it as at this point in time as another tool in our toolkit that we can benefit from.
Mhm.
Um, when we start to talk about general AI, I think that's really where the potential risks, dangers, or the kind of fear comes from is
Right.
what happens when we get to that point. How do we deal with it? And I think I think that we should be talking about this now. And I think that there are people like experts in this space that have great concerns about that. And I think so. I think it is an important topic. We're not there yet, but we should be prepared for that definitely. But I don't think that it should stop us from using it as a resource for good now
Got
and setting up the framework for how we apply it moving forward so that we are continuing to do it for good and we're avoiding building garbage in garbage out models as well could be already today risk to people and danger to people and to businesses.
Okay. Wow. Go ahead, Samantha Walker. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I enjoyed this. I certainly enjoyed asking that question about that the AI law question, because we're going to be hearing more and more about that, I'm sure, as AI machine learning, certainly are adopted more widely. So, thank you for your contribution. And I'm going to, hey, please, ladies and gentlemen, follow Samantha Walker. And this woman started Samantha machine learning division. So awesome. So thank you so